What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this one I want to break down what's going on with the overall market, talk about Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there, talk about what the charts are suggesting, and some very important things to know about how the market is moving. But before I do anything like this, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm personally not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends in just 9 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what the market is doing. Let's talk about some very important things. Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday, the 6th of September, and we have some data coming out. We have the imports and exports data. But when it comes to the market open, I just want to remind you all that 1 hour before the market opens, we have the Fed Speaker Collins giving a speech. And then 15 minutes after the market opens, we have this global services PMI data coming out, followed by the ISM services PMI at about 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. So every 15 minutes for the first 30 minutes expects some volatility because of these pieces of data that are coming out. And then starting at about, this is going to be like at like 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, we have the Fed speaker Beige giving a speech. And then we have right 1 hour before the market closes, Logan from the Fed giving a speech. So we have some Fed speakers during the final second and third hours of the day, or I'm sorry, the final hours of the day, if anything. And then besides that, we have, not to mention, the PMI reports in the morning. Anyways, moving forward, I just want to mention to everyone that the Dow has dropped a little bit, and we're starting to see some weakness in the market as we're starting to see oil prices going up. Now, what's going on with oil? Well, it's quite simple. There's higher demand for oil during times like this, and supply is not keeping up, as we've seen some announcements of production cuts. And on top of all of this, the market is once again doing something very healthy, nothing out of the ordinary. Now let's break down the markets, talk about Tesla. This was the big runner for today, and this is the one stock that did something different from what I was expecting. But besides that, most of the other stocks did what I had been expecting. But now I want to break down what happened with Tesla. So Tesla got this major sell-off on Friday and made almost a full recovery for today after getting the Chinese numbers. As a result of this, Tesla is still trying to show some signs of life, but we have to just see this thing hold above 255. That's going to be key for tomorrow. If Tesla holds above 255, there's going to be potential for it to push up to 260, in my opinion. If it holds above 260, you're going to be watching 265. That's going to be the next important level. Most likely, it's going to try to hold in this range between 255 and 260, kind of range trade for the majority of the day. I'm basically predicting that for tomorrow. But in a hypothetical situation of bad news, if we do break below 255, then it's going to test 252 and then 250. So those are some support levels to watch for. 255 is critical support, and then 260 as critical resistance. What seems more likely to me? I think Tesla might just trade a little sideways. It has some strength and some additional buying pressure that could perpetuate going into tomorrow, but the overall market could act as an anchor to slow it down just a little bit. So I think Tesla's going to just remain range bound, and we might just see some sideways price action within the higher range. And overall, it might hold up a little bit better than the market as it's gaining more strength. Now, when it comes to SPY, however, the 4-hour time frame is looking more bearish. We have this head and shoulders like pattern that's kind of slanted, and it's looking weaker as the days go on. Now, look for a little gap up or a little pop tomorrow morning, just like how we did today. A retest of about 450 to 451, then a rejection and a continuation downwards. And it's looking like if 449 gets tested and fails us, we're going to be watching this thing retest 448 flat and 447.5, which was a historical support. That's going to be very important, so watch those supports. And it looks a little bit more bearish than bullish overall. We were calling this out earlier on SPY, and that is what's playing out so far. Look for a pop and a drop on SPY, especially for tomorrow. The IWM is also looking more bearish. We called this out too, looking a little weaker. Look for a little pop, a retest of 187.71 at the 50, then a rejection, and for this thing to come all the way back down to 185. We have this very important candlestick that's acting as an anchor, which is going to bring this thing to about 185. For Aapl, Apple's a little bit different from the market. The problem with Aapl is it's still continuing to push up, yes, and it has that unfilled gap around 190. Could Aapl push more? Yes, it can. It's not necessarily done yet. It's still making higher highs and higher lows. But here's the problem with Aapl, okay? Aapl is still developing some bearish signals. Remember, I said it's developing them. I'm not saying it's going to crash yet. But when you look at it, we have a bearish divergence on the RSI and the MACD. And on the 30 minutes time frame, there's a triple and quadruple bearish divergence that has developed. That makes me suspect this thing is either going to start downtrending soon, or after Apple's event on September 12th, excuse me, guys, September 12th. Aapl, when it has its big event, it may get a major sell off because of a buy the rumor, sell the news sort of event. And I think there's a high probability of that potentially happening. So there might be a big sell off coming to Aapl very soon. Maybe by the next week, within 1 week, it's going to happen. We have the event in just 1 week from now. So I think there's a high probability of that. For now, it could hold up and try to push up for the very low 190s, but it still is developing this very, very bearish looking trend. And very soon, we're going to see this play out, in my opinion. I'm leaning more in that direction. The QQQ has a potential head and shoulders that is developed. We were talking about this potential right shoulder panning out, a retest of 380 or so before this thing rejects. And this thing came up to about 379, so just short, but now it's looking a little bit more bearish. So we have this lower trend that is developing. We had this high, we made a lower low right here relative to this one, then we made a lower high. So it's starting to trend a little bit downwards. And this thing looks like it's going to be approaching 376 over the next couple of trading days. Now look for a little pop, a retest of 380 or so, a rejection, and for this thing to come all the way back down to about 376, and maybe just trade sideways from there, but it's looking a little bit weaker. Nvidia is also favoring the bears a little bit more because of the 30 minutes time frame and also because of the 4-hour time frame. If you look at the 4 hours, looking a little weaker. So it hasn't truly curled enough just yet. It has been trying to hold above this 478.6 support, very close to our EMA. So watch for this thing to test the 20 EMA, which is acting as resistance. Now, there's a possibility that Nvidia might try to get a little higher above this 20 EMA. So there could be some moments where it hits 488, 490 again, but ultimately it could reject and start cooling off back down to 478. And if that were to reject, I'm going to be expecting it to come down to 475, very close to where our, I think it's the 30 minutes time frame happens to be, very close to our one of the previous EMAs. But anyways, I'm going to go back to that a little bit later. The 200 EMA is at 482. I think this is going to be tested as well. And if it breaks below that, 475 is on the table for the level below that. So I think it's going to come all the way down in the future. Might get a little pop in the morning tomorrow, trade sideways for some time, but eventually we're going to be watching it between these EMAs. And if it breaks down below the 200, I'm expecting it to come all the way back down to the 478 area, which I believe it will. So I think there's more downside coming. I think that Aapl is going to play a role in the downside for the whole market later on going into next week. It could happen as soon as this week, but it may be a little delayed because of how much buying pressure still exists. So I do believe there's downside coming to Nvidia nonetheless by the time we approach next week, especially. But this thing could always bounce later on. So for now, watch this thing at this resistance and expect some potential downside once we get those rejections. Looking at the NASDAQ, this thing ended up closing kind of red. It's at 14,000, sitting at resistance, but it is forming a head and shoulders pattern, a very small one on the 4-hour. And also if you zoom out on the 30 minutes, you could see the same thing essentially developing. So we have a potential head and shoulders pattern here that's kind of slanted. We also had this bearish divergence, which tells me the NASDAQ may start selling off soon. And it's starting to show some weakness in the technicals, which could be translating to more potential downside. SPX also has potential bearish divergence, which is starting to slow down a bit. This will likely drag the market a little bit lower. So I'm going to be watching this thing approach the 4480 level very soon, looking a little bit weaker. Our 200 EMA is at 4468, so SPX could continue to see downside with ES and the other futures. Remember the VIX? I was telling you the VIX had 13 to about, I would say the other level was around 12.73 as our supports. And so far, the VIX tried to get this formation. But the thing about the VIX is getting this bounce off this formation is if we break down, there's a possibility of the VIX coming down to fill this gap, but the VIX is not really working properly. There have been many times where the market kind of fell and the VIX just continued to fall with it. So I don't see this as a big trigger or guarantee of anything. We kind of gapped up on the VIX. If the VIX keeps going and breaks above 14.4, we're going to be watching it approach 15 very soon. If that's the case and a new uptrend is going to be respected, this is going to be a bearish signal telling us that the market's getting ready for something bigger. The dollar index is starting to break out more, especially on the 4-hour time frame and also on the daily chart. We have these bullish crosses suggesting that the market could see some more downside. So it's very important to note this. But there is also a possible, let me just double check this, bearish divergence, which tells me that there's a possibility the dollar rejects tomorrow and the market just gets a very small gap up. But the overall trend, when you ignore the divergence and you just look at the bigger trend, it's still more bullish. The dollar has been pumping quite a bit. So there's a good chance of the dollar trying to push up even higher. So if that's the case, another bearish signal on Coinbase. This thing's trying to base at the 200. We're going to be watching 72 as support, not to mention 70. And if anything, this thing is just looking like it's trading sideways, not looking too strong. It looks like it's going to be heading towards 75 very, very soon. So looking a little weak, but the best thing to do is to watch it around support, especially at the 275, and see if it could get a bounce from there. Google is also looking a little weaker because on Google, when you zoom out of the charts, this thing has been basically just trading sideways. There's a possible head and shoulders developing on it. That could lead to some downside, but for now, we're just going to be watching a range trade between 135 and 137. I think it might range trade for a bit before it continues lower. The trend is showing lower highs and lower lows being made, so there could be more downside. So watch for some range trading than some downside. Those are some real possibilities. For Amazon, we're going to be watching the 200 on the 30 minutes time frame. We have this imbalance all the way down here at around this 135 area. I think Amazon's eventually going to get there. Could pop a little bit, retest to 138, then reject, and eventually make its way down to 135. So for most stocks out there, the trends are favoring the bears a little bit more, but some of them have some resilience, such as Tesla, which is still showing life. I'm not necessarily going to count it out. That's why I'm going to be very unbiased and watch it very carefully. And finally, another stock that's quite resilient is Aapl. Aapl is still trying to hold up. It's holding the market up to some extent, but don't forget there are bearish signals developing on it. They're developing, meaning even if it pumps a little bit more, eventually there's going to be a bigger move to the downside pending for Aapl, in my opinion. It could happen over the next few days, if not by early next week, depending on Apple's event. So just keep that on your radar. For now, Aapl has been trending upwards. It's not necessarily done with. It's still, trying to go higher and higher, but this technical development is telling us that eventually there's going to be like a rug pull coming. Eventually it's going to come. Is it going to be like as soon as this week? I'm not too sure about that. It could take some time, or it may happen like early next week after Apple's event ends up playing out. So I hope that's as clear as possible. That's how I'm seeing this. And once Apple sinks, the market's going to sink lower. So be prepared for this and give the market some time. All of this is still developing. All right. So thank you for listening. Hopefully this video was helpful. Remain calm, cool, and collected. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace out.